Let's grill this man.
Let's grill this man like a fish.
That's one of my favorite words for talk. Grill him, grill him.
So many answers we may never know. Too many questions, get on with the show. No time for the chorus, only this verse. It's Kubrick's universe.
Open the podcast doors, Hal.
It's Kubrick's Universe, the Stanley Kubrick podcast.
Hello, campers, and welcome back to Kubrick's Universe. I'm Stephen, your Kubrick commentator for this episode. I've just been informed that a new book is due out in March called The Kubrick Legacy, which is edited by a past guest, Mick Broderick, and includes chapters by not only Mick himself, but our very own Skaz admin and Kubrick's Universe co-host, James Marinaccio, as well as several other noted writers and academics. The Kubrick Legacy book is described as providing a tantalising critical snapshot of the enduring impact and influence of one of the 20th century's most enigmatic and consummate screen artists. This book comes from Routledge Press in March 2019. Now, when it comes to books with Kubrick's name on the cover, it's impossible not to think of the book written by our next guest. Vincent LoBrutto is a teacher of motion picture editing and cinema studies at the School of Visual Arts in New York. He has worked for Fox and HBO as editor and for the ABC television network as a post-production coordinator. Vincent is also a special member of ACE, which is the Society of American Cinema Editors, and Vincent has also received the Robert Wise Award for Journalistic Excellence in the Illumination of the Art of Editing. He has edited and written for CinemaEditor and written for Cineaste and Film Quarterly magazines. He is the author of several books on filmmaking, including a series where he interviews some of the best artists in their fields, including film editing, film sound, cinematography and production design. Vincent has also written several notable biographies on filmmakers such as Martin Scorsese, the Coppolas and Gus Van Sant, but it's his seminal biography on Stanley Kubrick that places him firmly in Kubrick's universe. Without further ado, we now talk to Vincent about his book, Stanley Kubrick, a biography. Our host, Jason Furlong, will now assume control, and we will be joined by the aforementioned James Marinaccio.
Welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks. So you've insisted that me and my friends call you Vinny henceforth. So that's what it's going to be. Is that cool, Vinny?
Yeah, it's very cool. Thanks.
All right. We've got Vinny Vincent LoBrutto invasion for you, ladies and germs. That's an obscure metal reference. Anyway, all right. So listen, I'm going to start by asking you some questions about your teaching experience at the School of Visual Arts. And before I get to the question, I want to preface them by way of some quotes and actual comments from your students at SVA. One is, he teaches with such clarity and is so helpful. Another of your students said, the nicest guy at this school. Another student said, LoBrutto is legendary and the greatest editing and production designer professor in filmdom. One of them says, sweetie pie, helpful, honest, fair, and educational. Gosh, I hope that was a woman. Really understands what it means to edit a film. Said another, LoBrutto is awesome. So, how do your SVA students feel about you, I wonder? So let me get to the question, and thanks for indulging me. As your role as professor in the film department at SVA in New York, it would seem that you have a very good relationship with your students. First question, can you tell us how you got started there, and also about your students?
Well, I have to tell you again, it's great to be here. And you know, when I got these quotes and saw them, I didn't know what to say for a couple of minutes because I love my students. And we have a good rapport. And people have said things over the years, but when you read it like this, it was just, it's amazing. But anyway, I never thought I was going to be a teacher. I never thought I was going to be a writer. But I got into writing and wholeheartedly. And then at one point said, well, if you write, you teach. And without any real background, I didn't go to teaching college. I didn't really study it in any way. I think if I had anything, I always try to stay positive. But I think when I started to teach, I thought back of all the great teachers I had. But I also thought back of the teachers and the school and the system that didn't work so well. And I said, I'm going to try to not change it, but I'm going to do it differently. For me, what other people do, they do. And the main thing I think that I do, and I'll get to the question right after this, as a teacher, is I don't talk for 3 hours. I let them talk. We engage, it's like a Plato thing, like a Socrates thing. We engage in a dialogue about the subject that we're dealing with. So that's basically the way that I got into it. I decided I wanted to teach. And, of course, where would you go but, SVA? And I asked, and there wasn't an opening at the time. And I had to wait about a year, and I went about, I was writing one of the books. And I walked in the first day, a lot of planning. I mean, I think anybody who's read my Kubrick book, you can say whatever you want about it. But, I do my research and I do my planning. And, I try to be as meticulous as he was, He taught me a lot about that. So I walked in and I just started. And at one point, one of the students jumped up, and I think he got the feeling that people weren't totally paying attention to me. They seemed to. He said, "Do you realize what this man is trying to do?" Of course, during the break, I hugged him for about a half hour, and that's how it started. And that's really what I did. I brought in 1 million clips from movies as examples. It was an editing class as an example of what great editing was, and I just have built that from there. Students, SVA students, are all mavericks. SVA is a maverick school. Again, the Kubrick connection. Why I want to deal with Kubrick. And they're also awfully nice. I mean, if you treat people nice, they treat you nice. But these kids happen to be, really nice, and they're from all over the world, of course. Mainly Americans, but there are a lot of people from different parts of the world. And, it worked out well for the first class, and I wound up building up to like 6 classes. And that's what I do. I just make sure that I'm there 100% for them, and they seem to want to learn the way I teach.
Sounds to me like you're the kind of teacher that I definitely would have responded to. I like the maverick notion as well. So my dovetail question would be, given you have these maverick students and School of Visual Arts is has so embraced your lesson plan, that how do your students feel about Kubrick? Do you have a general feel? Do you have specific examples from students?
That's a great question. I mean, it may have been a little more, I've been teaching since 92. So it may have been a little more, not so much intense, but there may have been bigger numbers back then. But now, the first day, what's your favorite film? What's your favorite filmmaker? Kubrick. And they haven't seen all the films, and I get them to try to see Barry Lyndon and, Paths of Glory and that sort of a thing. But they know a lot about Kubrick. They're all big admirers of him for the same reason I think all of us always were, Mainly because he's a perfectionist and he was a visionary, and he made films the way he wanted to make them.
Right.
And he's very much at the top of the list. When he's mentioned, he's always mentioned first. Yeah,
as he should be.
Yeah.
I mean, I've in conversation with folks, said that I don't think it's a stretch to assume that in 500 years from now, maybe the likely still be teaching Kubrick in university, Film 101. And what's fascinating, go, please.
Oh, I was going to say is when he passed. Now, I said that he was like Beethoven. I forget the two people, but meaning the point that you could say Leonardo da Vinci. Anybody of that kind of. I think Picasso. I mentioned two people, but the point is, I put him in that category while he was alive. Now that he's gone, and like you say, 500 years, whatever amount of years, it's going to be more so that he's going to be considered not just a great filmmaker, one of the great artists of all time.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's what a lot of people who worked with him and knew him seem to kind of always come back to, is that above all, he was an artist. And clearly you get that. I mean, I think I knew that before I knew it. I kind of intuited it as a kid who was initially fascinated with The Shining, although I didn't know why. I just knew I was hypnotized by it. This would have been in the early 80s.
Right.
You have to forgive me if you hear that police car just going by. I live in a noisy neighborhood. Yeah, it's a noisy neighborhood.
It's noisy here, too. Some guy was doing his lawn before.
Oy vey. But yeah, I mean, that's brilliant, and insightful, brilliantly insightful, I should say, that you think that in, like I said, 500 years, yeah, they'll be teaching him in Film 101 as essential studying for people who want to become filmmakers. But it would be, worth nothing if it didn't focus on the fact that, above all, Kubrick's films represent him, the artist.
Right.
So, I want to get to your book because the book obviously does a great examination of him as an artist, among other things, of course, is the man, the filmmaker. But in the prologue of your book, which for our listeners is absolutely essential, you must own it. It's called Stanley Kubrick, a Biography. And the quote is, "The journey began in 1964 when at age 14, my friends and I went to the movies. Going to the movies meant seeing whatever was playing at the local theater in Sunnyside, Queens, New York, to pass the time and to be entertained. I can't say we knew what we were going to see that day, but the marquee announced the feature as Dr. Strangelove. As the black and white image of two military planes engaging in some sort of sexual misconduct crossed the screen, I knew I wasn't watching an Elvis Presley film. This wasn't like any other film I had ever seen. 6 years later, as a film student at the School of Visual Arts, I saw Paths of Glory and have never forgotten those relentless tracking shots of Kirk Douglas leading his doomed troops through the trenches. I caught up with the director's early work at a Museum of Modern Art retrospective and waited to see what Kubrick had in store for us. It was a screening of 2001, A Space Odyssey at the Ziegfeld Theater in the early 70s that put me on the course that led to this book. I knew that neither the cinema nor I would ever be the same again." So this question comes from Stephen, and right there you described your first exposure to Kubrick's films, but we'd love for you to further elaborate on this if you can, and tell us how you got to the point of actually wanting to write the first biography on Stanley Kubrick.
Thank you. That's a great question, and I'm going to answer it in a way that's probably might be a bit of a surprise. What happened is that the reason that I did my first book, which was an editing book, interview book with great editors, and the reason that I did that is two guys had written a book on cinematography where they interviewed great cinematographers, and I said, listen, editors deserve this, and I did it. So as I was starting to move on after that, I had read a gentleman, you may have heard of him, his name is Patrick McGilligan. He's a film biographer. I think he's probably the best there is. And I started to model my career over him, and I wrote him like a fan letter, and he was very helpful, as he is to everybody who writes on film, who contacts him. And we talked, and he gave me some ideas about how to become better at what I was doing. And then at one point, I had called him. I said, "Listen, I'm ready to do what you've done. You started in books that were interview books on people who were in the blacklist, mainly screenwriters, and now you write these incredible film biographies of directors. So, you ready for this?" I'm just a couple of feet from my library, and there's a million books on an old wooden bookshelf. They've been there since I started in 1967 collecting books. And Pat is on the phone, and we're talking, and I'm literally going, again, Kubrick, A, B, C, all the directors. I said, Pat, my number one choice would be Wells, but I said, this is a long time ago. Wells had been done a million times. Now he's done a billion times, mostly well, But I said, what else am I going to say? We get to K. I swear on my mother, this is a true story. We get to K, and he says, "How about Kubrick?" I said, "Kubrick?" I said, I think I knew the answer. There had never been a biography of Kubrick, and there were books on Kubrick. I had them there on the K, And so what it turned out, though, is that he didn't like Kubrick, and he was offered by W.W. Norton, and he was offered to write a book on Kubrick, and he turned it down because he said, "I really don't like Kubrick." He tells me the name, the publisher, and he tells me the name of the editor who's interested, but he says, "Call him, but you can't tell him who I am. You can't tell him who told you." So the first thing I say, I introduce myself, I try to do, some fast talking, and right away, he says, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "Do you know Pat McGilligan?" And I tell you, I never lie.
Right.
And I had to lie. So it turned out I sent him a proposal. He's a very big editor, actually. And I sent him a proposal, and it turned out that he liked it a lot, but he said it wasn't for him. It just wasn't, editors can be really, can be tough. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do have a quick follow-up, which is, it's you describing your book library, and you get to K, which is how you discovered Kubrick. What was the book that, caught your eye on the shelf, or do you recall which books on Kubrick you had in 1967?
Definitely the Kagan book. I forget the title now. Obviously, the Cinema of Stanley Kubrick. He went through several. Every time a new Kubrick film came out, he would put out another edition, which was great. That was there. I may have put The Director as Superstar up there because that had an interview with Kubrick.
Oh, okay. It's definitely one of those things.
Hold on one second. Let me see if I can give you a really fast answer of what other books may have been there. Because now that there are a lot of books.
I don't want fast answers. I want you to take 3 hours, like you're not allowed to do with your students.
That's the only one I see now. That's the only one I see is the Kagan book. Because everything else came later. But that was a great question because obviously I saw something. Right.
Steven's got a question here.
Yeah, I wonder if the Jerome Agel book was around then, the 2001 book.
I'm sorry?
The making of...
Yeah,
that would have had to been.
Either that was up there or that was in a section with films. Books devoted to one film.
Right.
And that's another great book. And he, if I remember correctly, I think I met his nephews. He started sending me postcards with facts that nobody knew about Kubrick. Nobody.
Wow.
And they're in the book. I can't remember exactly which ones they were, but he talked a lot about 2001 of stuff that he had learned. So I'm glad you brought that up. The Agel book is a great book.
Yeah, that's another essential.
When was this submit? How do you CIMENT? How do you pronounce that? When was that first published?
That was
Chimet's book. Chimet's book. Let's say the Chimette book was up there also. He was before me. I know he was before me because I remember studying his book for writing mine. He sat down and gave him interviews.
Yeah, he did. I believe that came out right after The Shining. It doesn't go beyond that. The first edition, which the lovely Stephen Rigg actually gifted me a copy with, I have, and it does have 3 separate interviews that Stanley gave him, and and it stops after The Shining.
That's right. And I would say, if you're interested in film, read every Chimette book. They're all great. He did one on John Borman, who, unfortunately, a lot of people don't even know who he is.
I do. We all do.
He was a friend of Kubrick's, actually, too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you guys know.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Borman films.
Deliverance is such a classic. But he's got he's got a long list of good films.
Yeah, he does.
I love all his films.
I think he's just currently working on a follow-up to Hope and Glory, isn't he? They're talking about it being his swan song.
Is that true? And he's got to be over 75, right?
Yeah.
These guys keep going.
It's amazing. If only Stanley could have.
Well, that's another story altogether, right?
Yeah, we'll get there.
He should not have died when he died.
I couldn't agree more. I wish I'd saved it. I was living in Boston at the time, and there were newspaper boxes, on the corner, etc. And even though it was Boston, you could buy the New York Times. And when I woke up that morning, my roommate, Krista Chellis, had just said, "Hey, man," and it hit me like a ton of bricks. At the time, I didn't even know his age. I was just like devastated that, what? And I always felt that, like, for him to go at 70 was like, he's like the only soul to ever to make it to 7 decades and still die way too young. That's just how I personally felt about it.
It's really tragic. To me, 3 great filmmakers that died at exactly 70. Orson Welles, Stan Brakhage, the experimental filmmaker, and Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, wow.
He never went to doctors. His father was a doctor. He was afraid of doctors or disliked doctors or whatever it was. And he thought he had a flu or whatever. He had a heart attack.
Yeah.
They would have rushed him to the hospital.
So with rock stars, it's 29 is the age. But with directors...
27. It's 27, I think.
Oh, 27? Okay.
Yeah, that's the one. The 27 club. Yeah, and with visionary filmmakers, it's 70. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, he didn't like to go to the doctor. Well, that's like Mel Brooks, I think, said, like, I don't, go to the doctor. Says, like, every time I go to the doctor, he says, you got this thing wrong with you, that thing wrong with you, the other thing wrong with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't have any of that stuff before I came in here. What are you telling me this for?
That's very funny. Sadly, it's true, but we all do go to the doctor because you don't want to die at 70 or 60.
Right. Well, that's like this 27. Trend with all this, this so-called organic food and everything that's going around. I mean, I'm like, to hell with it, because at my age, like, I'll take all the preservatives I can get. Sorry. Well, let me dip back because we'll come back to that. One of James's great questions here is, Vinny, were there any personal prerequisites that you had set for yourself before embarking on the book, such as being able to get in touch with Kubrick or his estate?
Another great question. For all those biographers out there, would-be biographers, never say, I'll only do the book if the person helps me, cooperates or talks to me. I found out, once you become Kubrick's biographer, you find out a lot of things. I found out that several people wanted to write a book on Kubrick way back. and they basically asked him like to help them, and he said he wouldn't even answer it. He didn't answer me either. Didn't expect him. So the prerequisites that I had, I want to be careful that I don't like rewrite history, because I went into this knowing that it was going to be tough, really tough. I knew Kubrick wouldn't help me. I figured he wouldn't talk to me, and I didn't even ask when I wrote him finally, I did not ask him to give me an interview. I just asked him if, cooperation from his office, if I needed some facts or that kind of a thing. But my prerequisites really were to write a great book, to write a book. I'm writing about a great filmmaker, make it as great as possible. But even if it's not great, just get every piece of information. I think the people who love my book, God bless them, love all the information. And people who have been critical, not that many, but people who have been critical, he put it in everything. Yeah, I did put it in everything, including the handwriting expert, which maybe if I did it again, I wouldn't put that in. But I thought there was something in there that said something about Kubrick. I was writing a book about someone that nobody knew anything about. All they knew was what they knew, right? That he was meticulous and a lot of takes and that sort of thing. So that was my prerequisite, to find everything you could find, and to find everybody who would talk to me. And, I'm so proud that there are 70 people in the book, because it wasn't easy getting 70 people. But, when you look at books you look at biographies, people talk to hundreds of people.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew that wasn't going to happen. So, it was a matter of finding the way to do that. But that was a prerequisite for it to be as meticulous and full of detail as a Kubrick film.
You definitely achieved that, and then some, Vinny. So, I mean, and to that point, no, sincerely, we mean it. Mark Lentz, our friend and brilliant researcher, actually touched upon that, because, your book is definitely praised, almost, like you said, there's some critics, but universally praised for its meticulous research and the vast number of interviews. And as you said, 70, in fact. So Mark has a question, which is, of your subjects, all 70, who were the most fun to interview?
Well, some people weren't fun, but most of them were fun. My favorites, I would single out Richard Anderson, who was in Paths of Glory. Right. And because, first of all, he's got a gorgeous voice. He's got that voice. You pick up the phone and you hear Richard Anderson talking, after watching the $6 Million Man, or if that's the correct title. Right. But he was so articulate, and he told me some personal stuff about Kubrick and Christiane, how they met. And he was a young, handsome guy. He was an old, handsome guy. He was talking to me, but he wanted to, try to date her, and then he realized that the director was interested. But so he told me a lot of personal stuff, and also contributions that he made, like in Paths of Glory when they're having the trial. Kubrick said, "Okay, go, action," and he got up and started the speech, and Kubrick said, "No, stop." He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Stanley, I really feel I should move here." What does Kubrick do? He's a genius, right? The guy, camera, go. He starts to move. Kubrick takes the camera, puts it behind the panel of generals.
Yes.
Right? You know that shot from
Of course, absolutely.
And followed him. See, to me, I'm getting the chills. That's filmmaking. Yeah. That's filmmaking. So Richard Anderson was a great guy. He also, told me working on seconds, and he told me all kinds of stuff. So he was great. I'm going to save the best for last. I have three people I've singled out. The other one, I'm laughing because he was a hoot, is Steven Berkoff, who was in Barry Lyndon. He's the one that gets in trouble with the debt, and he has to duel. He also was very, very, funny and sort of irreverent about Kubrick at times, and his family, and it was really, it was refreshing. It was like a different kind of approach. But of course, in the end, he respected, the genius of Kubrick. Now,
He
that's
was-
the last
He's
one.
one who spits in McDowell's face, right?
Yeah, he's also in Clockwork Orange. He's the cop. James is right on. He's the cop who spits on Malcolm's face. Steven
That was a
Burkhoff.
movie.
Right. That's right. I forgot about that. He was a great
Yeah.
actor. Great actor. Theater man.
Yeah.
But he had been in films, obviously. So
The
last
Richard
one,
Anderson thing is cool. Yeah, go on. Dude, it was the third.
The last one, to answer your question about who was the most fun, is I tried to get James B. Harris.
Mhm.
Now we're talking about what they say, the big kahuna. You know, he
Right.
worked with Kubrick for 10 years.
Mhm.
His name was above Kubrick's.
Yep.
Harris Kubrick Productions. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
So, I tried everything I could, and then I forget. Oh, somebody at school gave me a contact to Marie Windsor, the great actress who's in a million film noirs.
Sure.
And she was in The Killing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right.
So-
That's right.
So we had a great interview, but Jimmy found out that he had probably more than one email or letter from me. It was probably a letter at the time, and he contacted me and said that he would sit down with me. So again, this is a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I basically remember the gist of it is that I come in and he looks me in the eye. He says, "You want a drink?" I said, No, I'm fine. He says, I was just talking with Kubrick. We were talking about you. These guys like to test you, And I just
Right.
said, "Oh, that's nice, or that's cool," or whatever I say. I wouldn't have said cool. That's nice. And
You're like, shut the front door.
Stanley Kubrick don't mention my name, but anyway, so a couple of minutes go by, and he says, "I'm going to tell you why I decided to talk to you." And the reason basically was that he said, you go back to SVA and tell these kids how hard and how much we suffered to get where we were, which I thought was amazing. Then he said, they never tell you this on the phone. They get you down. I'm looking at the guy, and he says, "Now, there are three things." He said, "It's up to you." He said, if you can't deal with all three of these, then, we won't have the interview. Well, it's nice to have met you, and that's it. But he said, here's the three things. And the one I really remember is that he said, and I thought this was easy, he said, every movie that we do, we ask somebody, they say no, and we go to somebody else. He said, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want you to know who we asked and who said no or couldn't do it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, that's fine. So it was three things like that. I mean, it was like nothing,
Wow.
So what happened when I started to talk to him? All three, money, no budgets. Don't ask how much a movie costs. I said, that's fine. I don't care. I'll find it somewhere else, right? But I didn't say that to him. But I said, that's fine. So that was basically it. And then we talked for a very long time. And he talked to me, it was a man-to-man talk. I mean, he told me the story. He trusted me, I think, and he told me the story. He didn't ask any questions about trust. And he told me the story about young Jimmy Harris and young Stanley Kubrick and how they made these incredible movies together.
That's amazing.
I still love it. One of my favorite Kubrick movies is The Killing.
Oh, yeah.
Was Jimmy produced. Jimmy
And
found
of course.
book. He found the book in the bookstore.
Oh, that's right.
So
yeah.
When The Killing was finished and they brought it to California and they showed it, Sterling Hayden's agent ran up to the two boys and said, "What the hell? What did you do? He said, you can't follow the movie. It goes back and forth." Stanley Kubrick went back to New York, took that film and put it into chronological, the right order. I think they screened it just for themselves. And they said, this doesn't work, and they put it back to the way it is now, which is the way the book is. Everybody who criticized the structure or praised the structure for Kubrick inventing it, it's in the book.
Yeah, the book, I believe, was called Clean Break, the one that Jimmy Harris found. Clean Break,
yeah. They probably didn't like the title for it. I don't think I asked Jimmy Harris that. But, they didn't retain the title.
Well, The Killing certainly, jumps off the marquee. a lot better.
Oh, The Killing is a great title.
A great title.
So those are my favorites.
So, I mean, was James Harris one of the most difficult people to get of your 70 interviews? If not him, who were the most difficult to get?
See, I don't like the word difficult here only because it took time to get him. Difficult would be if he said, no, I'm not going to do it, and,
right.
Go back and forth, or, who are you, and that kind of thing. But there was none of that. So we could say, difficult, a lot of work, that kind of a thing.
Right.
Everybody else, I got to tell you, a lot of the interviews were set up, and some of the people were even found by my wife, Harriet, because it was so much work to write and to do all this, that she helps me on every book I do, but she stayed on the phone, and she got some of the Kubrick family members, not the some of the distant ones, were not too nice to her either. Leave Stanley alone, that kind of thing.
I'm actually looking at, while you're talking, I'm looking at some photos I took at the Kubrick exhibit, and they had a display of many of the screenplays they wrote during that period. Right. And they kind of were looking at a lot of different projects, and they worked on them. So my point is, I'm looking at a photograph I took of the cover page of a screenplay called Sudden Death. And it says a screenplay by Stanley Kubrick with additional dialogue by Jim Thompson based on the novel Clean Break by Lionel White. So that's what became The Killing, and this was they were first going to call it Sudden Death, and then they changed it to The Killing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think that's in my book. I'm not so sure I know that. Yeah, I guess they realized right away that they didn't want to use the original title, but to have it on a screenplay is interesting. It means that they really felt it was going to go.
Yeah.
Well, the word difficult might have been the wrong choice on my part.
No, it's not you. It's not you.
But I completely get what you meant. The more challenging to get in touch with. That was my only angle of inquiry. But was there anyone you really wanted to get in touch with but couldn't, other than Stanley, of course?
One of the things that I did, this I may do differently now. I didn't try to contact everybody, every actor, every crew member, because a lot of people I felt it was no way it was going to go. So I had to to pick and choose. The one, if this is bending it a little bit, it was the most difficult to get. Is that okay to go with that?
Of course.
The two that were most difficult. This one is another, like a classic Vincent LoBrutto story. Bernard Cooperman. Somehow I found this guy. He's a friend of Kubrick's. He was in the photo club with him, and he didn't become a photographer. But he was in Look magazine. Kubrick dragged him to some movie theater with a girl that Kubrick had with him, and they went up on the balcony, and he said, try to kiss her. He took a series of pictures, and she slaps him at one point, I believe. And so it was a photo story. So I thought it was interesting, to talk with him, and he sounded like he was like 100%, that he was going to do it. So for some reason, it was in Long Island. I didn't want to drive, so we got a car, and I go out there, and would you like something to drink? Yeah, good, okay. So he says, I'm not so sure I can do this. So, when you hear that, instead of getting excited or upset, you get very calm. Because you say to yourself, there's no way I'm leaving here without an interview, Do the best I can. Right. He was afraid of Kubrick. Wow. And I don't know what I said to him at the time, but I convinced him. I said, what you're saying is honest, and it's, there's nothing negative about this. There was something about the girl that he was concerned about, I mean, how people could get.
Discretion.
And maybe somebody, I've had this happen, where by the time you get to talk to them, somebody has talked to them, and they change their mind.
Yeah.
So once he was relaxed and said it was fine, I turned on the tape recorder, and he was 100%, like nothing had happened.
Absolutely. Now, I had Stephen go in and block all of your contacts so no one would be able to tell you not to talk with us. Because I didn't want any middleman getting between Vinny and Kubrick's universe, man. So we had to do what we had to do. You know, it's a ruthless business, this podcast.
I like that. The other person, there may have been one other person that was in this category, but unfortunately I don't remember at the time. But I had found out, I think it's in Eagle's book, that the great Roger Karras, president of the ASPCA, worked on 2001. Kubrick so respected him, he, I don't know if he was in charge of making sure, he was just making sure everything was working right, research and that sort of thing. So he was easy to find because I think he was still in the ASPCA, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
And he gets on the phone and talked to me. He didn't put an assistant on. He said, Vinny, he said, it's very simple. If you can get Stanley Kubrick, this was another thing I asked Kubrick for. If you could ask Stanley Kubrick, and he'll say to me, or you or somebody, that you'll talk to me, I'll talk to you, rather, then we'll do it. So I think I told him, I said, Mr. Karras, it's not going to happen, you know, and I respect that. I said, I wrote Mr. Kubrick a letter, and that was one of the things I asked for, and I never got a response, so I'm assuming, I don't know if you assume it's a no, you know, but it wasn't a yes. Listen to this. Maybe a decade later, I'm at SVA, and two students come up to me. One of them, I don't think he was his son, but I think he was related to Karras. He said, you know, he passed away. I said, I know. I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. He had just passed away. He said, we were going through his papers, and we found your letter that you wrote to him. It's a little off the beaten path type story, but it shows you what you go through as a biographer. You know, I mean, life is very interesting. Absolutely. But there was one or two other people that I can't remember that said, you know, that if Kubrick says yes, but not a lot. I mean, I was worried that everybody was going to say that. Why not say it, right? What's the big deal?
Yeah, well, given that, you know, he was just very protective of his and his family's privacy, that would have been a logical assumption on your part that, you know, most people in contact with him wouldn't want to share with you. Did you ever try to get in touch with Stanley's sister, Barbara?
Now, here's what I had to ask my wife this because I knew it was going to come up. That Harriet was talking on the phone to somebody who was a relative, who in the end wouldn't talk to me. So, and Barbara came up, and he said, "Don't even try to get her. She won't do it," or it was just like super negative. So we didn't even try to get her. She's in for like a very short clip, one clip in Life in Pictures, the documentary on Kubrick. And I was sort of surprised. I don't know what I expected Kubrick's sister to look like, but straight ahead type woman, not an intellect, and who knows what kind of relationship they had. I mean, the one thing I do know that's in the book is that Kubrick was a big sports fan. So he used to write Barbara or call Barbara and say, "Send me tapes of the NFL." You know,
right. Which is such a great story. I mean, such a cool thing to know about him.
It is a great story. You know, but there's nothing else in terms of what they were like as children, or you know.
Yeah. She's that image of little Barbara and Stanley, who I think was about 7 years older than her, or somewhere around there, 6.5 years older than her.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, they've turned that great little moment where they're dancing and he hip checks her, bumps her onto the floor. You can find that as like a GIF now if you just go to type in like young Stanley Kubrick or something. It's been turned into a GIF and memes and stuff, and you see Barbara as a little girl, and there's pictures of her like playing with his hair and stuff, and it's clear that he was under the surface a really affectionate guy, especially obviously, towards his family, people he cared
He
about.
adored those girls. He adored those girls.
Yeah.
Barbara's son Robert used to be on the Alt Movies Kubrick group occasionally. He always used to, whatever it was he said flattering about his uncle, he would have the caveat of, I haven't spoken to him in a very long time.
Right.
Yeah. See, that's the thing, I mean, Barbara would have said, listen, my brother's a very private guy, as you know, so I can't talk to you, I don't think she really even asked for permission. Because she would be, not about the movie, she would be all personal stuff.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, it wouldn't
Which I
be...
managed to find in various places.
Yeah, she wouldn't be talking with you about, aspects of his filmmaking. And so if she didn't make herself available, it's because she likely knew that she would have been asked about, stuff she wouldn't be okay with sharing, personal stuff, family stuff.
No,
and that makes sense.
And of course, I would have asked about the parents.
Yeah, of course.
Did I not ask that?
Right. I mean, that would have been anyone's natural preclusion to want to know. Yeah. I mean, just because, I think like Kubrick himself, the bulk of his really diehard fans seem to have that thing in common with him, which is kind of, like a restless curiosity and just wanting to know. I'm sure that it would have been great for you to, get the chance to speak with Barbara or, Jack or Gert, but regardless, the fact that you and Kubrick being fellow New Yorkers, I can't imagine that hurt you at all. Didn't it, in fact, I'm guessing, help you in some way with writing your book? It
helped a lot being the New York guy. Actually, Pat McGilligan, who I mentioned earlier, is good friends with Baxter. And he said, listen, Baxter is a very experienced guy. He's in England. He has a lot of contacts. He said, listen, you are right a foot away from where Kubrick was born.
Right.
Do the Bronx, do New York. And it was very good advice. And I have to say that if you read the book carefully, when it gets to England, I mean, the films are covered, but it's not the life in England is not, he was in that castle, Kubrick Castle. Life in England is not covered the way New York is covered. So it was a big help. And and understanding him also. He was a Bronx guy, and I'm a Queens guy. You can't get rid of that, no matter what you do.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I'm born and raised in North Jersey. I'm 13 miles from the city. And it's true that New York and Jersey are not the same. But, on the other hand, we're like the sixth borough, as some people say, especially this part of it. And you can't separate. I'm planning to move out of Jersey. And I know already that, you can take the boy out of Jersey. But as they say, the rest, you have a certain thing, and I know James can attest to this. When you're brought up in this part of the country, you have a certain quickness about you. You're quick to think, quick to act, and I've traveled a lot, and I noticed that people, are very interested. They're very curious to know what it's like to, grow up here, because our reputation kind of precedes us as like people who get things done. And that goes back to Kubrick, because I mean, he was absolutely a person who just had to see it through, gets the job done, and no excuses, not having it.
No.
Well, I want to ask you about because unfortunately we weren't the first to get an exclusive with you. You did an interview with Jamie Duvall and Dean Treadway and the great guys over at Movie Geeks United, which is an awesome podcast. Those and wonder what is causing this. You hear me? Can you hear me?
You're coming back.
It's coming back.
All right. Bear with me. Can you hear me?
It's coming back. It has a little bit of dropout in it, but it's coming back.
All right. Test.
That's good.
Test.
I think you're back.
Test.
I think you're back, Jason. Yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I had to close some other windows.
To keep the signal in.
Yeah.
So you were just you're containing it now. You've closed the windows. You keep that signal in that room.
That's
I like that. That's a good technical touch.
Love it.
Jason, you were talking about the Movie Geeks podcast about something that
the Movie Geeks.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, you know why you should never fart in an Apple store?
Why?
They don't have windows.
Oh.
Apple windows.
So what about the Movie Geeks?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will be appearing nowhere. So, okay, Movie Geeks, yeah. I was just saying that, you did an interview with the great guys at Movie Geeks United.
Right.
We're fans and friends with Jamie and Dean. And unfortunately, we did not get you first for an exclusive, but it's a great interview. And in it, I believe you mentioned that while you had never heard from Kubrick directly, one of the nicest compliments you did get indirectly, and you referenced this before, was via Jimmy Harris, Kubrick's producing partner from the early days. When you first met with James to interview him for your book, he told you that he'd just gotten off the phone and that Stanley and he were talking about you. Then after the book was published, I believe you got a call from Kubrick's assistant, Tony Frewen. And during that call, he said that Kubrick had read your book. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said that you knew more about him than he did. And that Kubrick also really liked that your book was not a typical kind of Hollywood film biography. So that must have been amazing to hear.
Well, I always tell this didn't happen this way, but I always tell the story this way. First of all, I'm in my room working, and the phone rings. It's Tony Frewen. I know who Tony Frewen is. And he explained, he's British, has this great accent, and he's a real gentleman, a great raconteur, and we're talking for quite some time. And he says, I don't think he said Kubrick. I think he said, not the professor. He called him like the governor or something. So, the governor read your book. And then he said those two lines. And then I fell on the floor. And then I got up and continued the conversation. I didn't really fall on the floor, but mentally I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think even now I totally could understand. I could see Stanley Kubrick saying that. If he would have said, no matter what he would have said, I would have accepted it.
Sure.
But I think what he meant was, there were facts that came out in the book that he may not have known about himself, that other people said. So whatever. It was forget that. I mean, it was a great honor, And the thing about it not being a typical showbiz bio, Hollywood bio, is that I did not sit down and figure out what style I was going to do. But I don't write like a Hollywood biographer. I write like a New York guy,
Yeah.
So that's how I wrote it, and I think he appreciated that it didn't have all that, and that it had a lot about the technical making of the movies. That I'm sure he didn't say that, but I'm sure he respected that, because a typical Hollywood biography would say, he worked with this actress and that star,
right.
And I said that, but I talked a lot about how he made movies. So it was incredible. My parents were still alive. I told them, and nobody could believe it. I mean, they believed me, but it was just. But he's a guy that has said 3 words outside of words that he needs to say for making a movie. He doesn't make comments like that.
Yeah, he could have knocked you down with a feather. But
that's not the reason why Tony called. Tony called to ask me if I would be, whether I could be interviewed for a film that they were doing. And he said, Jan Harlan. I said, of course I know who Jan Harlan is. Jan was directing, and Kubrick had already passed, and it was A Life in Films. And don't look for me in that film again if you think maybe you didn't see me, because I got cut out. But I always say I got cut out because of Tom Cruise. They needed room for Tom Cruise. But I gave them a long interview, and they came over here. Those being Jan Harlan, his son Manuel, and rest in peace a jillion times Kubrick's daughter Anya, who's the opera singer who died young, very young.
50.
Yeah, that's right. Not 70, 50.
Yeah, exactly.
She was. We were on the car. We landed in the Bronx. She was like a 8-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl. She was in her father. She had never. I don't even know she had been to New York. She was running up and down. Oh, Daddy lived here, because they lived in a million places. Daddy lived there. Daddy lived here. You guys know that. But so that's how I met them, and that was before the AI thing.
Right.
So that answers that part of that question, because I know that.
Let me go back, because I'm curious to say, you just said about your part in the documentary A Life in Pictures being cut out because of Tom Cruise. Can you elaborate on that?
No, I didn't mean that literally. I mean, if you're doing a documentary like that, I shouldn't have said it that way.
No, I think I knew what you meant. Go on, please.
Yeah, if you're doing a documentary that way, and you have all these stars, Tom Cruise being one, and there were people who were not stars, but the people who had intricate, they weren't Kubrick's biographer, I wouldn't necessarily, I never asked whether I was in and got taken out. I would never ask that, because most likely I was never in. I think they felt there may have been an interesting idea, but then I think when they heard what I had to say, I don't know how it would work in a documentary. You don't want to dominate. Once you put in a biographer, then you got to put them in all over the place.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously in '97 there were 2 full-length biographies which came out. There was yours and John Baxter's, and really none since. So this question's a 2-parter. Did Baxter's book affect the sales of your book, and how do you think yours and Baxter's differ in significant ways?
Let me say at the outset that I have never, and probably will never, read Baxter's book. I'll tell you why in a second.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
tell us.
In terms of the sales, I'd have to really see the 2 sales together. My book, God bless Kubrick. I mean, and it was a tough time for my wife and I in terms of finance. The book sold like crazy, and it sold well, in Europe, foreign sales as well. So, and I know I autographed hundreds of copies.
Sure.
And I used to see it in stores, and there would be a big stack there, So it did very well. I don't know how Baxter's book did. I have a feeling that I may have done a little better, but I don't really know for sure. See, I think for him it was like another book,
Right.
I mean, I know biographies too, but to me, there's Kubrick, and then there's the other 3 biographies I did. Kubrick was a major biography. I mean, it turned out to be,
Oh yeah.
I love the other books, but
I totally get your point. I'm just wondering, were you aware that Baxter was writing at the same time?
Yeah, see, that's what I was touching on before. Pat McGilligan told me that there's this gentleman, and I went out and read his book on Fellini, which I thought was very good. And he said that he's in England, and I don't know if he had already started. I don't even remember who came out first. It was in the same year, so it doesn't really matter. I think his book came out in paperback, and I think I saw that in the store before my book came out. I'll give you a very simple answer, and I really don't have anything else to say because I haven't read it. The Fellini book was excellent. I've read his book on Lucas and his book on Robert De Niro. And let me say that we write totally different kinds of books. We pick subjects in a totally different way. I would never pick a subject of somebody that I didn't 100% like.
Right.
The two books that I mentioned, to me, my tastes are negative.
Interesting.
You can't be critical about somebody, but they seem to be personal negative, you know? So that's part of the reason. That's basically it.
That sounds kind of like you're answering why you've no interest in reading his book on Kubrick, if I can surmise.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, no, as long as that's accurate, you know, I'm just trying to get it right.
Yeah. No, it is.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to Vincent LoBrutto for talking with us. We will be broadcasting more from Vinny in the future. If you want to know about Kubrick in depth, then go out and buy a copy of Vincent's wonderful book, Stanley Kubrick, A Biography. Thanks to our wonderful Kubrick's Universe host with the most and interviewer, Jason Furlong, and to Mark Lentz and James Marinaccio for research for this episode. A quick correction, John Bowman completed his sequel to Hope and Glory in 2014. It was called Queen and Country. Sorry about that. At the start of the show, we played an original piano piece composed and performed by the man who never leaves his keys in the ashtray, Mr. Boogie Williams. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts, and if you're on Facebook, come and join in the fun at the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society.
It's Kubrick's universe. We just live in it.
We have taken very thorough precautions in this podcast against broadcasting anything which might only be attributed to human error.